Kowloon's Gate is a cyberpunk horror feng shui Taoist philosophy-themed first-person FMV adventure/dungeon crawler game developed by Sony Music Entertainment and released on February 28, 1997 on the PlayStation 1 exclusively in Japan. In Kowloon's Gate, you take the role of an unnamed feng shui master, sent by the Hong Kong Supreme Feng Shui Council on a mission inside Kowloon Walled City, a real-life city in Hong Kong that was completely demolished in 1994, in real life and in the chronology of the game, but has now mysteriously reappeared. And yeah, I've chosen to pronounce it feng shui. I know there are other ways to pronounce it, fusui, feng shui. In Japanese it's husui, but I'm going with feng shui. Your mission as a feng shui master is to find out why the city of Kowloon has rematerialized and to correct the distorted flow of qi that's resulted from its sudden reappearance. Your journey will take you through a twisted version of the already twisted alleyways and side streets that made up Kowloon Walled City. Along the way, you'll meet many strange people, as well as many strange amalgamations of people and everyday objects. Some of these are friendly, some not so much. You've never known true terror until you've been accosted by a man who's been fused with a cocktail shaker. You'll perform divination rituals, expel evil energy, travel through time, and attempt to awaken the 4 divine beasts of the celestial sphere in an attempt to restore balance to our world. Just another day in the office for a feng shui master. Rearrange some furniture in the morning, take on the forces of evil after lunch. Kowloon's Gate has quite a large adventure crammed into its 4 discs, and there's a lot to unpack here. Hong Kong history, feng shui practices, Taoist teachings, and obscure gameplay mechanics. Not to mention the language barrier, as the game is only available in Japanese. A fan translation is apparently being worked on, but there's no word on when it might be finished. The last update I could find on it was a forum post from 2022. I'm no translator. I only live in Japan and speak and read the language well enough to function in daily life here. So admittedly, this was a tough one. But I played through the game twice and combed through all of the cutscenes. Plus I read the supplemental books, one of which comes bundled with the special edition of the game. The other I had to track down separately. It arrived in acceptable condition, and I wore out the spine going through this thing. A lot of people are interested in Kowloon's Gate, probably because they've seen screenshots or gameplay and thought, what the fuck? Also, there's not a whole lot of info on it in English. It's a huge question mark for most people who've heard of it. So let me just tell you up front. For as weird as the game looks, its story is way more bizarre than you could ever imagine. So ready your lo pan, make sure your Bagua mirror is correctly aligned, and let's head into the twisted alleyways of Kowloon's Gate. Kowloon's Gate is credited to Sony Music Entertainment on the box and in the instruction manual, but the team inside Sony Music who worked on it were known as Zeku. The only other title they developed was the 1999 Japan-only PS1 exclusive Planet Laika, a game that actually has an English fan translation and one that I really need to get around to covering on this channel. It takes place during Christmas, so, maybe when the time's right. In the early days of the PlayStation, Sony was actively seeking people outside of the video game industry who were interested in trying their hand at making a game. Also, Sony Computer Entertainment, the division in charge of the PlayStation, was made up of a lot of staff from Sony Music Entertainment in the beginning. It was mostly people at the company who were interested in the PlayStation project and just wanted to get involved.
ソニーほどの会社がプレイステーションの発売にあたって本当に何百万ドルのものお金を使うとお思いになりますか？しかもこんなサックなゲームに。Suck a big time.
This is most likely why the PS1 got so many music-themed games, like Parappa the Rapper, Planet Daub, and others. It's probably also why so many PS1 game discs doubled as music CDs. How many people remember using the PS1 boot screen or dropping their game disc into a CD player to find out if you could listen to the soundtrack? I remember it most distinctly from Jet Moto. Just don't forget to skip the data track. Development on Kowloon's Gate began sometime in the early 90s, while the PlayStation hardware itself was still in its own development phases. It was originally planned as a launch title, or at least a near-launch title for the PS1 in Japan. Obviously, things didn't quite work out that way. The staff were entangled in numerous delays due to complications with the game engine and unfamiliarity with the brand new PlayStation architecture. But the biggest cause for delay was the fact that most of the people working on KOWLOON'S Gate had never actually worked on a game before. The only one who did was main director, scenario writer, and game designer Nakaji Kimura. His previous credits include A&R direction on Eastern Mind, The Lost Souls of Tong Nao, which was one of the first games from the creator of LSD Dream emulator, Osamu Sato. And wouldn't you know it, Sato was also a multimedia artist who worked outside of video games before being recruited by Sony. I've already done videos on the Eastern Mind games and LSD Dream emulator, so you can check those out if you're interested. Back to Kimura though, after his work on Eastern Mind, he was creative director on Killik, the DNA Imperative, and its follow-up, Epidemic. Two early first-person shooters for the PS1 that are not good. What the role of creative director entailed in these projects is unclear, but whatever he did, his work impressed Sony so much that they let him create his own game. KOWLOON'S Gate would finally be released over 2 years after its initial launch projection and sold very poorly. February 28, 1997 was just a month after the Japanese release of a little game from Squaresoft known as Final Fantasy VII. However, a cult following for KOWLOON'S Gate formed, and sales picked up over the course of the year. Eventually, it managed to sell about 135,000 copies. Not amazing compared to other PS1 titles from 1997, but not as terrible as its initial weeks on the shelves would have led anyone to believe. Thing is, I feel like if KOWLOON'S Gate would have hit its 94 release, or even a 95 one, it would have done a lot better. During those middle years of the 90s, FMV adventures were still impressive and novel. The fact that the game had a compelling story and a rather involved fully 3D dungeon crawling aspect to it would have also probably grabbed more people's attention in late 94, early 95. We could have even gotten a super shoddy official translation in the West. Now we can only wonder at what might have been. In fact, there was a trailer for the game with an English voiceover that was released sometime in '96, but nothing ever came of it.
What do the people of the Ring World believe in? And what are they so afraid of?
Originally, KOWLOON'S Gate was going to be set in a Kasbah-style area, with Kimura and the rest of the team particularly researching bazaar towns from Morocco. Eventually, Hong Kong's Kowloon Walled City was chosen as the setting. The team even traveled to Hong Kong in the spring of '94 for research. However, by that time, the city was in the final phases of its demolition, so they mainly explored the surrounding neighborhoods. Kowloon has a complicated and fascinating history that you could spend an entire video talking about, and others have, but for the purposes of setting the stage for KOWLOON'S Gate, I'll just give a brief overview. Kowloon Walled City, known locally by its nickname Haknam, or City of Darkness, was a slum located just north of Kowloon Bay and former Kai Tak International Airport in the southern region of Hong Kong. Crowded into a roughly 6.4-acre plot of land were dozens and dozens of haphazardly constructed buildings, so tightly packed together that only narrow alleyways, maze-like corridors, and open rooftops were the only ways to traverse the city. For much of its modern history, post-World War II, it was known as a lawless area. Both the Chinese and British Hong Kong governments took turns claiming rights to jurisdiction, but ultimately neither of them really wanted much to do with the city. Because of this hands-off approach, opium dens, prostitution rings, and other seedy establishments flourished. Unlicensed doctors practiced medicine, and health standard and labor code averting factories operated freely. At its height in the early 1980s, roughly 35,000 people lived in the cramped confines of the city, and by that time standards of living had improved somewhat. Neighborhood associations had formed. An almshouse at the center of the city offered care for the poor, the addicted, and the elderly. The government even came in and connected utilities, built generators, and designated safe water wells, whereas before the Triad and other criminal groups were just illegally siphoning electricity and water off of main lines from other areas outside the city. Local police began patrolling. The Triad's opium dens and prostitution rings were corralled into only the deepest, most secretive parts of the city, and government workers were entering to take censuses and map the layout. There were still unchecked health and safety violations, unlicensed doctors, and an enormous rat and cockroach population. along with various other problems plaguing the city. But it was no longer the den of debauchery that it had once been. If you want to know more about its long history and the lives of the actual people who called Kowloon Walled City home, I'd suggest tracking down a copy of City of Darkness, Life in Kowloon Walled City by Greg Girard and Ian Lambert. Physical copies are out of print and very expensive, but maybe there's an archive on the internet somewhere that can help you out. City of Darkness is a photojournalistic look at Kowloon during the late 80s and early 90s and includes dozens of interviews with residents from all walks of life. The book paints a very different, more human picture of the city than the dark and foreboding reputation that precedes it. Anyway, the reasons for all that government census taking and surveying of the city throughout the early 80s became clear several years later. After decades of turning a blind eye, finally, in 1987, the British Hong Kong government announced the clearance. The low-income residents were offered a pittance of government compensation for their homes and businesses and forced out of the city in phases. Demolition began in March 1993 and ended in April 1994. In just a little over a year, Kowloon Walled City, with a history that stretched centuries, was gone. On the spot where the tangled alleyways and jumbled buildings once loomed, now stands a public park, an expanse of greenery, open walkways, and tidy basketball courts. The only original building left is the almshouse that once sat at the center of the city. Though it was a public health hazard and a disaster waiting to happen, what with all the building code violations and densely packed nature of the place, its maze-like alleyways and anarchist self-rule has long been fascinating to outsiders. The other thing that's really interesting about Kowloon Walled City, and something that's important to the plot of Kowloon's Gate, is that the city itself became a violation of feng shui practices. Why is this such a huge thing? Mainly because for much of Chinese and Hong Kong history, feng shui was thought of as a science. Even today, feng shui is considered in the architecture of buildings and the planning of cities. Harmonizing the flow of qi encourages good fortune and prosperity. Disrupting that flow has disastrous consequences. Before World War II, Kowloon was, according to the introduction to City of Darkness, a proper Chinese town, laid out with painstaking attention to eternal principles. The Chinese believed that a town should face south and overlook water, with hills and mountains to the north. Given such conditions, the yin elements from the water and the yang elements from the mountains combine in such a way as to bless the lives of the inhabitants with harmony. During World War II, when the Japanese invaded China, they tore down the walls of the city and used them to build the airport to the south, on an artificial island, disrupting the yin elements from the water. After the war, when people began to re-inhabit the city, urbanization began. Buildings sprung up quickly and chaotically, with no regard for city planning or functionality, let alone the flow of qi and harmony. I mentioned yin and yang. Yeah, that's the one. The symbol that was emblazoned on all those pogs and slammers back in the late 90s. That's what my generation knows it from. How proud we can all be. You know, I wonder what happened to all those old hippie pog dealers who used to set up tables in malls and stuff. What kind of lives are those people leading now? What has your pog empire wrought unto you? Sorry, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, a video game. No, but first we need to talk about yin and yang. I'm getting back to the game, I swear. So, yin and yang. The concept is the foundation of feng shui principles. Yin and yang represent two opposing energies. Instead of thinking of them simply as one versus the other, though, it's probably best to consider them similar to positive and negative charges in an electrical field. One can't exist without the other. Both are needed in order for the whole to function. In the universe of Kowloon's Gate, we live in the yang realm. But there's another side, a shadow to our world of light, and that is the yin realm. In our yang realm, Kowloon Walled City has already been demolished, but in the yin realm, it still stands. This yin version of the city has now invaded our world of yang, and this is why the feng shui master is sent to investigate. See, I told you we'd make it back to the game eventually. After being assaulted by an intense introductory cutscene that leads to the main title screen, God. We're dropped into a slightly less overstimulating opening cinematic. The Hong Kong Supreme Feng Shui Council, which is made up of a bunch of old men in floating chairs strapped with VR headsets, has called a meeting to determine what's to be done about the reappearance of Kowloon Walled City. They explain a bit more about the relationship between yin and yang, how neither can exist without the other, yet they shouldn't intermingle like this either. They also mention that in the yin realm, the power of feng shui has been blocked. If the four divine beasts, Byako, the white tiger of the west, Genbu, the black tortoise of the north, Suzaku, the vermilion bird of the south, and Seiryu, the azure dragon of the east, are awakened inside Kowloon, then the flow of qi can be corrected and balance can be restored.
The 4 beasts are actually printed on each of Kowloon's Gate's 4 game discs.
The power of the 4 divine beasts will supposedly awaken within 4 individuals in the city. Unfortunately, the Feng Shui Council doesn't know who these 4 individuals are. They themselves might not even know. So we, as a skilled Feng Shui master, have been chosen to go in and investigate. After we're given our mission, we meet Ai Pin, another high-ranking member of the council. She hands over a feng shui scope to help identify distortions in the flow of energy. After leaving the council chambers, we can actually turn around and overhear one of the head council members express concern to Ai Pin about whether or not we're up to the task of completing this mission. Ai Pin says she believes we'll choose the correct path, as her voice morphs from female to male.
わかりました。Just
時間をください。
Uh-huh. Interestingly, if we look at Complete KOWLOON'S Gate, a supplemental book featuring design materials, interviews, and a full, though not always helpful, walkthrough of the game, we learn there was some kind of incident in the Feng Shui Master's past that may have caused concern for the council members. In an introductory paragraph written from the point of view of our playable character, they describe a fatal incident that caused the Supreme Council to strip them of their duties and sideline them for several months. Now, this disgraced Feng Shui Master has been called upon to investigate the Yin version of Kowloon Walled City, and they have a sneaking suspicion that this may be a suicide mission. Well, the only way out is through. So, up a narrow stairway, past an ODing opium addict, drawing on those real-life inspirations already, and the next thing we know, we've arrived at Longsheng Road, the first major area of the game. Now, disclaimer here, this is obviously a Japanese game, yet many of the kanji for names of people and places are meant to be read in the original Chinese. So I first read this place name as Liuzhou Road, Dragon Palace Road in English, until I heard one of the characters say it in dialogue. It's actually pronounced Longsheng Road. Sometimes there are katakana readings in parentheses for the names, but not always. And even with them, these are the Japanese pronunciations, so they're slightly off. All of this to say, I apologize up front if I get any of the names wrong. Anyway, on Longsheng Road, we're introduced to the first-person adventure game segments. These make up half of the gameplay in Kowloon's Gate. First-person, free-roaming dungeon crawler segments make up the other half, but I'll cover those in a bit. For the adventure game portions, you navigate the city by moving to preset nodes. During movement, full-motion video, or FMV cutscenes play as the camera swoops through the locations. When you arrive at a node, you're then presented with a static, pre-rendered background. You can turn in place to look around, choose new directions to travel in from the symbol at the bottom of the screen, or speak to any highlighted NPCs in your vicinity. When moving to a new location, it can sometimes be hard to judge where exactly you're going to be taken, but everything is on a set path, so once you've familiarized yourself with an area, you'll have an easier time getting around. The creators referred to these sections as JPEG dungeons, a term they were clearly hoping would catch on, considering how heavily they used it throughout the packaging, instruction manual, and supplemental materials for Kowloon's Gate. It never did, but you can't fault them for trying. As with many adventure games of this type, the key to progress is discovering the triggers to move the story forward. These can involve conversing with the right NPC, finding an item, or sometimes just spinning around in circles to make something happen. That last one occurs more than once throughout the game, and it can be pretty frustrating trekking back and forth through these areas, looking for something to move your progress along, only to find out that you needed to just make yourself dizzy to get someone to appear. The pace of these sections are slow because of the travel animations, but you're meant to sink into the atmosphere and take in your surroundings. Kowloon's Gate was created at a time when developers were really trying to impress you with just the concept of 3D, especially on consoles. And again, all of this would have been mighty impressive had the game hit its original release date. Still, the attention to detail is impressive. Comparing the game to real-life photos of Kowloon Walled City proves that the team really did their homework. The streets are grimy, with wiring, tubing, and piping laid bare overhead. The alleyways are dimly lit and claustrophobic. The sense of foreboding is palpable. There are often stairwells, paths, and openings that you can't go down. Some of these will open up later, others never will. The tilting camera, minimalistic animation, and dark setting give Kowloon's Gate an eerie atmosphere. It really makes you feel like you're just hurtling through this unwelcoming place, frantic and unsure of where you're going. The music helps to massively sell this mood as well. The soundtrack was composed by Kuniaki Haishima, who doesn't have too many video game credits to his name, but he scored a lot of tokusatsu shows on Japanese television. Haishima was a perfect fit for Kowloon's Gate. He made use of many traditional Chinese instruments, such as the erhu and dizi, and mixed them into these off-kilter and unnerving compositions. There are also vocal elements, which range from chanting to whatever freak-out thing is happening in that intro cutscene. The music of areas also changes depending on your objectives. In the dungeons, there's always this sense of tension, almost desperation forcing you forward. But even in the slower, more go-at-your-own-pace adventure game sections, the music will ramp up with urgency during certain story moments where you're led to believe time is of the essence. It's actually really effective, and always leaves you feeling like you should get a move on with your investigations. I also need to highlight the sound effects, particularly when you receive new items. I can't put my finger on it, but there's something so satisfying about that sound. Another thing that adds to the hallucinatory mood of the game are the characters themselves. Many of them don't trust you. Some will even refuse to speak with you because you ain't from around these parts. This is a direct reference to the close-knit and closed-off community of the real-life Kowloon Walled City, a place where outsiders weren't welcome. You, as the feng shui master, are not part of this community. You've been sent from the outside, here to investigate and make sense of a place that operates on its own logic. And that already strange logic has been further corrupted by the fact that this version of the city and all its inhabitants are from another dimension. As you explore and attempt to talk to certain people, you'll start to figure out who the important ones are, who's your ally and who's your enemy. For example, in this first area of the game, you're going to always want to check in with the locksmith. This guy very quickly shows himself to be on your side, and if you're ever in doubt as to how to move the story forward, the answer is almost always to speak with him. As the story continues, you'll move to new sections of the city. There are only a few throughout the entire game, and one of them acts as sort of a hub area. As you complete quests and help out different characters, they'll gradually begin to trust you more. Whispers of your good deeds will spread. This will make certain characters from other parts of the city friendlier toward you, even if you've never met them before. It will also bring you to the attention of the more unsavory characters operating in the city. All of this is built into the script and progression of the game. There are no choices to make. The story is very strictly on rails, much like your movement. But the fact that some NPCs will say, "Hey, I've heard of you. I wouldn't normally trust an outsider, but you seem alright." I don't know, it makes this linear narrative feel more organic, and it makes the city feel like a living, breathing, changing place. I think it all comes down to how well written and memorable the NPCs are. I mean, who could forget such characters as the bottle salesman, the used shoe seller, or the mercury dealer? Okay, that started out as a joke about how all the characters are only ever referred to by the generic name of whatever shop they own, but the mercury dealer is anything but generic. Look at this guy. Still, this idea that many of the characters are only ever identified by the things they own or sell is interesting, and does end up connecting to the overall plot. The characters all have freakishly bizarre designs too. Character designer Koki Inoue said in an interview in Complete Kowloon's Gate that he was inspired by dolls and action figures, as well as Tim Burton's The Nightmare Before Christmas. His aim was to give the NPCs doll-like appearances. Other influences in the character and overall visual design of Kowloon's Gate were the films Delicatessen, Freaks, and Blade Runner. Naturally, Kowloon's Gate draws particularly heavily on cyberpunk influences. William Gibson's novel Neuromancer is mentioned specifically by director Kimura, and Bruce Sterling is name-dropped as well. But the developers were also attempting to create a new kind of visual and literary style that they called Asian Gothic. In Complete Kowloon's Gate, Asian Gothic is described as a reference to the architectural style and literary genre that originated in Europe. According to director Kimura, Gothic is a focus on distortion, excess, and chaos, and the sense of fear that these conditions produce. The focus is not on people, but on the buildings and spaces themselves. As we'll come to see, the city of Kowloon is represented as one of the most important characters in the game, and dehumanization and objectification are taken to literal extremes in the story.
All of this emphasis on philosophy and literary themes may lead you to believe that the game takes itself very seriously, and at times it does, but it also recognizes the absurdity in its premise. There are several scenes, characters, and interactions that are meant to be silly and fun. There's enough of a quirky sense of humor here to offset all of the heavier elements. I like when games, and just stories in general, can transition smoothly through different moods, and Kowloon's Gate manages it well.
Our first objective is to investigate some kind of malicious force that several characters believe is originating in an alleyway, or hutong as they're referred to, called Chongqing Garden.
Hutong literally means alleyway, but in Kowloon's Gate, the word is used to refer to the abandoned places throughout the city where evil energy has gathered.
The mirror salesman has gone in to investigate this disturbance, but hasn't returned. Like I said earlier, these JPEG dungeon sections operate on adventure game logic, so there are several triggers that need to be completed before you can progress. We need to buy a vial of mercury from the mercury dealer, speak to the locksmith once, spin around in place to get the shrimp peeler child to appear, then speak to the locksmith again, and this time he'll give us an 8-jeweled sword, which is a weapon we need to enter the first dungeon. So let's break down these events. When we speak to the mercury dealer, he says the mercury he sells is ordinary, but he'll give us a special price, 100 shiza, which is the name of the currency in-game. In the past, mercury was used in many parts of the world for medicinal purposes. That is, until it was discovered that large doses contributed to disfigurement and death. I'm not sure if mercury was still being sold in Kowloon Walled City in the mid to late 20th century, but either way, the dealer here is pretty adamant about us handing over the money. The first time I talked to him, though, I thought, what the hell do I need mercury for? And ignored him. Big mistake. Noob-level adventure game player thinking. I'm ashamed of myself. We have to buy the mercury right now, even though none of the other characters mention anything about mercury or needing mercury or anything like that. And we won't even use the mercury until about halfway through the game. But you have to buy it now, because the game won't progress until you do. Now, in terms of guiding the player in an adventure game, this is actually something that Kowloon's Gate is pretty good at. In other adventure games, problems mostly arise from the logic not having any explanation. You'd need to figure out on your own to get a balloon animal shaped like Robert Frost's face to scare away some pigeons on the rooftop of a building so you can steal one of the eggs from their nest. That's an actual solution to a puzzle in Grim Fandango, by the way. At least in Kowloon's Gate, the logic may not make sense, but characters are very straightforward about what you need to do or give them. So the easiest way to make progress is to just listen to what they say and don't question it. We learn about the malicious presence in Chongqing Garden and the missing mirror salesman from the locksmith, who also tells us that a misaligned Bagua mirror deep within the alleyway is the cause of the distortion. A Bagua mirror is used in feng shui to redirect the flow of qi. They're typically hung outside the home to deflect bad qi away. They can come in many varieties, flat, convex, concave, all with different effects and purposes. Since the mirror salesman deals in, well, mirrors, it makes sense that he went to check this out. There's also this dude clinging to the other side of the gate who doesn't say anything. Don't worry about him. Spinning around, we meet the shrimp peeler kid, who tells us where the entrance to Chongqing Garden can be found. Spinning back around, the dude hanging out by the fence is gone, and the locksmith entrusts us with the 8-jeweled sword. The locksmith also mentions a 7-jeweled sword, but says the mirror salesman has that one. Once we enter Chongqing Garden, we're introduced to the other half of Kowloon's Gate's gameplay, the first-person, free-roaming dungeon-crawling segments. These are referred to as real-time dungeons by the devs. In the beginning of the game, they consist of the multi-leveled, interconnected hutong, or alleyways, of Longsheng Road. Later on, we'll explore an abandoned theater, the city's waterways, and a cluster of apartment buildings. In keeping with the slapdash architecture of the real-life Kowloon Walled City, these areas are mazes, filled filled with odd angles, dead ends, and strange geometry. Luckily, we have a full map of whatever floor we're on available at all times with just the press of the start button. We can even turn off the background by pressing select to get a clearer view of things, and you can add multicolored markers to keep track of objectives. You can keep up to 13 on a map at one time, so go crazy. This first dungeon is just a tutorial, so it's extremely simple and hard to get lost. Later dungeons will become much more complex. Sometimes you'll have an objective you need to reach on the same floor, but in another section of the dungeon. So you'll need to go to a lower floor, sometimes all the way to the basement, to find the path into that other section and work your way back up to where you were. This can become a bit tedious, admittedly, but luckily it's not down to just blindly hunting through these mazes. After the tutorial, you'll gain access to characters known as navigators that are hired outside of the dungeons, and hiring them is a necessary trigger to being able to enter a dungeon, so you'll never be thrown in without one. Also, once you complete your objectives or defeated the boss of a dungeon, they're the ones who will take you back to the JPEG dungeon parts of the game. Navigators will stop you in scripted locations as you're exploring to give hints on where to go and what you need to do to proceed. Each major dungeon has a different navigator, and they all have different personalities. The first one, Little Fly, is a dude who rides around on a flying motorcycle. Reminds me a bit of the Helizoid from Wizardry 7. He's actually the least useful navigator. His directions are super vague. To offset that, the dungeons that he appears in aren't that complicated, but the last one that he was the navigator for took me the longest to complete in the whole game because his directions were utter dog shit. In the theater district, you'll meet Honey Lady, who hops around the rafters to scout out locations. The Waterways have Mr. Dope Man. Yeah, he burrows underground to chart the path forward. And the apartments near the end of the game introduce us to Bamboo Z, who's very similar to Honey Lady. These navigators are way more useful. Later dungeons have lifts that only go to certain floors, dead ends, blocked stairwells, holes in floors, one-way passages, and other obstacles. Frequently, you'll be required to defeat an enemy on, say, the first floor that's sealed a door on the fourth, or vice versa. As long as you're paying attention to your navigator's instructions, you'll never get too lost. Speaking of enemies, they can't be seen while exploring, but the distortion their presence causes can be sensed through the feng shui scope that the main character is wearing. Enemy encounters are not random. They always show up in fixed locations on the map, so you can avoid some of them, or if they're in your direct path, ready yourself before engaging. When you're in the vicinity of an enemy, the screen will turn purple. Your health, or Chi-P as the game refers to it, is shown at the bottom of the screen. While in the evil aura emanating from enemies, the bar constantly drains. But if you move away into a safe zone, you can walk or run by holding the X button to regenerate health. This is an extremely useful tactic to remember. There are healing items in the game, but they're best saved for in battle. When you're very close to the enemy location, the screen starts to waver, and when you've found the center of the distortion, the battle music starts and the screen transitions to combat. This battle music is great. It never changes throughout the game, but I never got sick of its satisfying introduction to combat. After entering battle, we see our enemy, a Guiri, an ordinary everyday object that's been possessed by evil energy. That's right, the normal enemies you fight throughout the game are inanimate objects that have come to life because of distorted chi.
They range from bathtubs, clocks, and toys to mannequins and other humanoid figures. The designs get pretty out there. After the enemy appears, a ring of options from your feng shui scope will materialize. These are all made from 3D objects and labeled with kanji as part of their design, so you can begin to see one of the major hurdles in translating this game. Anyway, we've got 5 options in combat: expel, absorb, examine, use item, and run away. Combat is turn-based, and it's up to RNG whether you or the enemy gets the first turn. There's also a hidden active time bar mechanic, similar to Final Fantasy games, because if you stay idle on this ring menu without selecting anything, the enemy will eventually take another turn. When you enter any of the sub-menus, though, time will pause, allowing you to make decisions. Another quick note on the sound effects here: I love the wooden clacking noise that happens as you cycle through options. It makes it feel like the feng shui scope you're using is a real object in the game world, like all of these pieces are made from carved wooden blocks. Now, onto actually fighting, you probably noticed the 5 multicolored orbs at the bottom left of the screen that are displayed even outside of combat. These represent 5 phases, referred to as wuxing. These are key agents in many traditional Chinese fields of study. They are wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. To simplify this explanation and keep it in terms of Kowloon's Gate's gameplay, you can think of them as elemental strengths and weaknesses. In wuxing, there are several cycles that determine how these elements interact with each other. Kowloon's Gate operates on the excessive destructive cycle, known as shang-cheng. So, wood depletes earth, earth blocks water, water douses fire, fire melts metal, and metal destroys wood. The game doesn't tell you this, but the adventure book that comes packaged with the game does. What you need to do is first examine the enemy to determine its weakness. For early encounters, the game just straight up tells you, but after your first foray into the dungeon, it stops doing that. Once we know the enemy's elemental affinity, we choose Expel to blast it with the correct energy type that's been stored up in the 8-jeweled sword. Hitting the enemy with its weakness will destroy it with one shot. The 8-jeweled sword can only expel energy, but after we rescue the mirror salesman, we'll be given the 7-jeweled sword and will only be using that weapon for the rest of the game. The 7-jeweled sword gains the power to absorb evil energy from enemies. Absorbing an enemy's element will destroy it and store its power within the sword. We then have that power to use whenever we encounter an enemy of the opposite elemental affinity. If you happen to mess up and use the wrong element, you don't lose the charge either. It just doesn't do anything. So that's forgiving. The sword can only hold one use of each type of element at a time. If you encounter another enemy of the same type and try to absorb it while already holding that element, it won't work. Oh, and you can only ever hold 4 different elements at a time. If you fill the sword with all 5 elements, you die. So combat and exploration become this balancing act of absorbing enough elements to fight off enemies, but always making sure you have 4 or less in the sword at any given time. But let's say you have water absorbed, but you don't have its opposite, earth. Then you encounter a water enemy. What do? You have nothing to fight it with. Well, you could run away, but as I said earlier, some enemies are sealing doors that are blocking your progress. This is where consumable items come into play. There are 3 items that you can find inside these little blue prisms, or that are dropped by defeated enemies. They are guidi balls, shellfish powder, and men's oil. The best thing to use is shellfish powder, which changes the elemental affinity of the enemy. Then you can either absorb that element or expel its opposite to destroy it. You'll be practically swimming in shellfish powder by the midpoint of the game, so these are the things to use when you find yourself in a tight spot. The other item, guidi balls, instantly destroy one element that an enemy is holding onto. However, they're in short supply, and later on you'll encounter boss-type enemies that can hold as many as 3 elements at a time, so you might want to save them to bail you out of those fights. Then there's the men oil, which, refills your health. You can use them while exploring, but they're best saved for in battle, since you can replenish health in safe areas of the dungeons by just walking around. After a fight, you'll gain some health back and the purple aura will disappear, making it safe to walk around in this area without fear of your health draining. Purple enemies are also permanently defeated. After the tutorial dungeon, we'll start encountering guidi with green energy. This indicates an infinitely respawning enemy. There aren't too many of them throughout the game, maybe 2 or 3 in the later dungeons, so it's not as annoying as it sounds. They're useful for stocking up or expelling elements from your sword if it's getting too full. You can also safely run away from any encounter. You might take a hit if the enemy gets a turn first, but choosing to run away never fails. After returning to the dungeon screen, you get a few moments of cooldown, so you can move past enemies that block your path without having to actually fight them. There are also special item battles that take place. These are usually against plot-important characters and involve selecting a specific item in your inventory to defeat them. The battle still operates in a turn-based manner, so you can die here if you're hit by too many attacks while trying to figure out which item to use. If you've been paying attention to the story, it's usually obvious though. Sometimes enemies appear that morph between several types and aren't possible to examine. You can attempt to absorb them, but sometimes it won't work if you already have whatever element it's holding. In these moments, using items or just running away is your only option. If you die, you'll get a game over and see some gross stuff oozing out of a refrigerator? You'll then be kicked back to the load screen. You could load a save, but there's also an option at the bottom of the list to retry. Selecting this will set you back at the beginning of the dungeon. All of your progress is reset, but there are certain dungeons where you don't get access to a save point, so this can end up saving you from losing too much overall progress. Sometimes while exploring, special events occur that the game refers to as accidents. The screen may turn dark for a while, or your sword will fill up with energy on its own. The darkness will go away after a while, but the sword absorbing energy could land you in hot water if you're not paying attention. There's also a hidden character within the dungeons who will mess with you if you encounter him. Remember that dude hanging out by the locksmith in the beginning of the game? This is Damianus, and he's a bit of a trickster. Sometimes he'll warp you around the dungeon, even outside the map, and he also likes to trigger fake game over screens. I actually never found him while playing, unfortunately. The same or a similar character appears in Planet Laika, so that's neat. Overall, I enjoyed the dungeon crawling and combat in KOWLOON'S Gate. It's just engaging and strategic enough to keep it interesting. Enemies hit pretty hard, so there's a constant tension, especially in boss fights, but it's never too difficult. Because encounters are fixed, combat never became tedious. It always felt like just enough during every dungeon crawling section. There are no stats or experience points, no character progression associated with combat at all, so tying enemies in combat to exploration progress was a smart move. My only complaint is that later on in the game, absorbing elements, expelling energy from your sword, or even examining an enemy during certain fights will fail. The game explains this by saying the location is especially charged with evil energy, but I felt like it messed with the flow of combat too much and was just an arbitrary annoyance. When this happens, the solution is to use shellfish powder to change the affinity, or just use a guiri ball for an instant win. I don't know, maybe it was a way to add a bit more tension by forcing you to use some of your limited consumables, but I thought it was just unnecessary. One last thing to point out about dungeon exploration, there are a couple of game-breaking bugs you may encounter. At the end of dungeons, the navigators are supposed to appear to take you back to the adventure game sections. At a couple of spots, they may not appear, and you'll be stuck. You need to reload a save from before you entered the dungeon to fix this, meaning you'll have to redo the entire dungeon, and maybe even parts of the adventure game section depending on when you last saved. Make sure to utilize all 3 of the save slots the game gives you. Other bugs that can occur include the screen remaining black when transitioning to different areas, or in and out of battle, and the feng shui circle not appearing when you enter a fight, but the enemy will continue to get turns even though you can't do anything. If this happens, reloading saves within the dungeons will fix it. I played through the game twice and never encountered any of these bugs, but I read about them in an FAQ written by Who Was Phone 404, which was based on a Japanese guide written by Hana Q on their personal website, who also mentions the bugs. Anyway, back to the tutorial dungeon, most of what I said about combat isn't relevant, because we only have the power to expel energy, and we have no items. After defeating a couple of enemies and recovering a keyring, we enter a previously sealed room and rescue the mirror salesman. The mirror salesman explains that the room where the Bagua mirror is placed is blocked by some kind of force he refers to as the keyhole center. In fact, there are actually 4 Bagua mirrors hidden at the end of the 4 interconnected alleyways throughout Longcheng Road. After we get out of the dungeon with the help of the first navigator, Littlefly, we speak to the folks on Longcheng Road who mention some stuff going down in another part of the city called Kowloon Front. Before leaving, the spring seller tells us about Kowloon Net terminals, these red, Japanese postbox looking things that act as save points in the JPEG dungeons. There's one right next to his stall. Besides saving, the terminals also connect to the internet, but we need an access card before we can do that. So for now, we bid farewell to Longcheng Road and head off to Kowloon Front. This is sort of the central hub of the game. There are several key NPCs here, such as Old Man Sun, the seemingly senile fortune teller.
Wei, the stoic leader of a local Qigong school. Qigong is an exercise and breathing technique with a long history in Chinese medicine and martial arts.
Game Kids, a goofy hacker who will periodically show up to assist us. Charlie, an eccentric former magician and current mushroom dealer. What kind of mushrooms, you ask? What do you think? the taxidermist, a creepy guy who is definitely up to no good, and Rich, the manly bartender with an eye patch who, if this game had ever gotten an official English translation, would have definitely been voiced by Steve Blum.
You spilled my egg. I needed that egg.
Speaking of voices, the voice acting is excellent throughout. Not every character is voiced, but the ones who are all put in stellar performances. Some of my favorites are Rich,
俺がリッチだ。よろしくな。で、何の用かな。
Charlie the mushroom seller,
それからまあいっか。聞きたいことあったらその時はそっちから声かけてくれ。
and Shanji, a character who appears much later in the game.
おい、なんか急に。
気持ちが軽くなってくる。
We learn a few important things by wandering around talking to all these people. One, access cards for the KOWLOON.net terminals are the keys to this city. They're basically digital social security cards that contain all kinds of personal information. Everyone in this version of Kowloon has one, but they often misplace them, which will be convenient for us. A second thing we learn is that several dragon veins run through the city. Dragon veins are underground channels of qi and are a real-life concept in the practice of feng shui. There are rumors that somewhere in the city there's also a dragon's den, a place where the vein opens from beneath the earth. Third, there's a place called the Twin Shop, where they can apparently manufacture a twin for you. If you're a natural twin, though, they've got a special seminar they'd like you to attend. That last detail probably sounds especially bizarre, but it's one of the most important pieces to the entire plot, so we'll return to that later. We can get our hands on an access card by speaking with Old Man's son and having our fortune told. It's not good, and he feels so bad for us that he hands over an access card as consolation. Turns out the locals can tell that the card doesn't belong to us, so it's useless until Game Kids shows up and hacks it to make it our own. Now that we're legit, sort of, we can log onto the net at any of the terminals throughout the city. There's one at the bar where we meet Rich the bartender, and another important character, Xiaohei, who's renting a room on the second floor. You know she's important because she's all over the promotional materials for the game. Xiaohei has a lot of story set up for us, but we'll get to that. First, we need to check our email and the in-game chat room known as Rhizome. Just like in real life, the most important thing you'll need to do throughout Kowloon's Gate is check your messages. Several important characters contact us through email with either guidance on what to do during certain parts of the game, or story details that will help piece together the overall narrative. We'll also be threatened by a character named Gatari at several points. The chat room, Rhizome, will also periodically become active with chatters discussing current events. The usernames Zap, Papillon, James, and others may be the online personas of certain characters in the city, or they may be people we never actually meet. It's never revealed. When we're done surfing the net, as they would have said in 1997, we head upstairs to speak with Xiaohei, who tells us about a recurring dream she's been having. Every night she witnesses her twin sister standing in the middle of a wasteland, awakening to some kind of power. At the end of the dream, her sister always says the same thing, to meet her on the Day of Fire. Xiaohei has spoken to someone named Master Sha about this Day of Fire. According to him, each day of the week in the Yin and Yang calendar is named after one of the 5 elements, and the Day of Fire happens to be an auspicious one. Xiaohei suggests we go meet with Master Sha if we want to know more. We find him hanging out in a seemingly dead-end alleyway. He knows all about why we're here and says that there are several important days of fire throughout history, so he's having trouble determining which Day of Fire Xiaohei's dream is referring to. Moreover, he's worried Xiaohei may fall prey to an evil influence known as Garmin, which is a power that mimics Minli, but is ultimately an artificial version of that power. What? Okay, so at this point, we've had a lot of words and phrases that mean absolutely nothing to us thrown our way. The Day of Fire, Minli, Garmin, not to mention concepts such as twins, divine beasts, and dragon veins, and we're going to continue to be plunged into the deep end for quite a while. Kowloon's Gate's style of storytelling is to throw everything in the kitchen sink at you from the get-go, and then slowly pull the pieces together. It's almost novelistic in that way. It's not afraid to bombard you with details and expect you to remember them and connect the dots between characters and story beats on your own. There are also several points throughout the story where things just become overcomplicated, and I think this is due to its adventure game structure. There's a lot of busy work that ends up making an already convoluted story even harder to follow. So to help anchor you and give you a better idea of what's actually going on in Kowloon's Gate, I'm going to clarify the overall plot before we jump into the full story analysis. As we continue exploring the city and accomplishing various tasks, we'll gain the trust of a resistance group known as Zeku. They're fighting against the influence of another organization called Snake, who are controlled by elders known as Old Snake. After we've straightened out the Bagua mirrors and proven that our goals align with Zeku, we'll gain access to their database on KOWLOON.net. This is where we can learn more about some of the terminology that many of the characters like to just casually drop into conversations. For starters, Minli is a power innate to twins. It's their ability to resonate with each other. We've all heard stories of twins being able to almost telepathically communicate. They know when something has happened to the other, or when the other feels pain, things like that. Well, KOWLOON'S Gate gives this special connection a proper name: Minli. Minli is a strong force, and twins naturally awaken to it over the course of their lives. However, evil is drawn to this power, so it's easy for twins to become possessed or corrupted by malicious energy. Zeku has started an initiative called Project Fuki to help identify and protect twins as they awaken to Minli. Not all twins are capable of awakening. The ones that do, though, gain other special powers, such as clairvoyance, telekinesis, and even powers of exorcism. Snake, meanwhile, has set up seminars at their twin shop and twin center in the city, disguising them as special lessons to help twins awaken to their power. In reality, they're using the seminars as a way to capture and control the twins, forcing them to awaken by using a drug they've developed called Blue Claw. This unnatural awakening process creates a corrupted version of Minli, which is called Garmin. Snake can more easily manipulate this imitation power. Snake is also manufacturing twins who only awaken to Garmin. In fact, many of the characters we meet in the city are fake twins. The end goal of all of this is to collect enough Garmin to birth an even greater power called Laudi, which could be translated as the Elder Power. Snake believes they can use Laudi to awaken the Azure Dragon Seiryu, one of the 4 divine beasts. Awakening the dragon using Laudi will cause it to turn evil. The evil dragon will then grant them immortality. It's always about immortality, isn't it? Their entire plan is possible because of the corrupted flow of qi in the yin version of Kowloon. Snake is intentionally doing things like misaligning Bagua mirrors, creating sealing stones to block the flow of dragon veins, and encouraging the propagation of evil energy to keep the bad qi flowing. Zeku wants to reverse this corruption and protect the true twins. The feng shui master needs to awaken the 4 divine beasts to restore the correct flow of balance in the yin version of Kowloon Walled City, which means destroying Snake's plan, which aligns with Zeku's goals. And these are the main power struggles in the game. Are you still with me? Good, because it's only going to get more complicated from here. At this point, I've introduced most of the gameplay elements of KOWLOON'S Gate, so the rest of this video is devoted to its story. If you're holding out hope for a fan translation someday and want to experience the game on your own, skip to this time to get my mostly spoiler-free final thoughts on KOWLOON'S Gate. If you'd rather follow along with me as I attempt to unravel this Gordian knot of a story, then just keep watching. Okay, so for those of you who've decided to stick it out to the end, let me just say, KOWLOON'S Gate is fucked up. I know people like to throw around the term fever dream for anything that's even just a little bit offbeat nowadays, but KOWLOON'S Gate is a fever dream. So let's get to it. The first part of the game involves correcting the Bagua mirrors in the Hutong of Longcheng Road, but we can't just go up to the mirrors and start adjusting them at random. That would be disastrous. We need a special item called a compass doll. The mirror salesman had the doll and corrected one of the mirrors with it, but after he did, the compass doll was possessed by evil. Inanimate objects are susceptible to malicious energy after all. He can't exorcise the doll himself, so he gives us a super magnet and asks us to do it. We enter the alleyways and make our way to the Keyhole Center and meet this detective butt-looking thing. This is the Keyhole Man, and he is a Wanin. We can learn more about Wanin in the Zeku database. The word can be translated simply as delusional person. They're people who have been infected by the malicious energy and distorted qi of the city. This has caused them to fall prey to their own delusions, manifesting in an intense object fixation where they eventually become fused with whatever everyday object they're obsessed with. For the Keyhole Man, it's keyholes. Later on, we'll meet characters who have fused with generators, boilers, control panels, neon signs, and telephones.
Think we'd all be phone Wanin nowadays. If the Wanin's delusions remain unchecked and the evil energy within the city continues to grow, these people will fully transform into whatever inanimate object they've merged with, which would then leave them vulnerable to being possessed and becoming Guidi. There are hints later on that some of the Guidi we encounter in the dungeons were once ordinary people who became Wanin and then fell victim to the malicious energy inside. Anyway, the keyhole man blocking our path isn't especially evil or anything, he just wants a key. So we give him one, and he tells us how to find the room where the Bagua mirror is. When we enter, we have to fight the evil compass doll in an item battle. The super magnet removes the evil energy possessing the doll, so now we use this creepy little thing to correct the alignment of the Bagua mirror. Once we've aligned the other two Bagua mirrors, we'll be contacted by Zeku's messengers, the mysterious Honto twins. There are actually 4 of these guys, designated by the kanji on the scrolls that cover their faces, so that technically makes them quadruplets, but they're always referred to as twins. We find out from them that Zeku has placed an undercover agent inside Snake, a guy named Chan Lu, but he's disappeared. They want us to break into his house and retrieve his access card. They're certain it will have some information that may point to his whereabouts. Chan Lu has a twin brother, Chan Ling. Anytime you hear twins mentioned, just know they're important. Master Sha sends us an email and tells us he's figured out that days of fire always fall on May 22nd throughout history. Today is May 22nd, in fact. How fortuitous. Master Sha also mentions that Xiaohei has gone off to meet an onmyoji in the city to learn more about the Day of Fire. Onmyoji are sometimes thought of simply as exorcists, but they were actually high-ranking imperial court officials during the Heian period of Japanese history, from years 794 to 1185. They were involved in divination and geomancy and were instructed in the 5 phases of yin and yang, so you could consider them closely related to a feng shui master. Not exactly the same, but working in the same sphere. According to director Kimura in Complete Kowloon's Gate, even though this game is set in Hong Kong with a largely Chinese cast of characters, it's implied that the onmyoji here is Japanese. We'll meet up with him later. After finding Changlu's house inside a real-time dungeon, we take his access card and also find an evil mirror. The mirror will be useful throughout the game. We soon find out that all of our meddling with the Bagua mirrors and helping out Zeku has brought us to the attention of Mr. Chen, who runs the turtle soup shop in the seafood market area. He's more than just a restaurateur though. He's actually in charge of Snake's production of the Blue Claw drug. He demonstrates what will happen to us if we keep getting in the way of their plans by cutting off a turtle's head and dropping it in the tank for the other turtles to feast on. Ugh. Afterwards, we watch a random guy on the street blister and melt. All that's left of him is an eye, so we go ahead and pick it up. You get Bubble Man's eye. Oh, he was just a Bubble Man? Is that all?
He's a bubble boy!
Imagine the kind of freak you have to be to watch a man turn into bubbles, and then go over to his sudsy remains and steal his eye. There's a fetish for everything, I guess. After we hand off Changlu's access card to the Honto twins, they ask us to check on Master Sha at his home. Problem is, the door is locked and nobody's answering. This following section was actually a lot of fun. You kind of feel like a detective, going back and forth, running down leads, talking to various people, and figuring out how to get into Master Sha's apartment. If we speak to some people around the city, we find out that Charlie, the mushroom dealer, is also a master of unlocking. Charlie opens the door for us, and we don't find anything except for Master Sha's access card. If we use it on a Kowloon Net terminal to access his email, we find some correspondence between him and Xiaohei. She's looking for a way to get to Liuxin Road, so it seems we'll need to head there next. There's talk that a dragon vein may connect to that part of the city. Before we can follow that lead any further, Rich at the bar informs us that one of those special seminars for twins is going on over at the twin shop. Showing our hacked ID to the clerk at the counter allows us to enter the second floor of the twin shop where the seminar is being held. Behind some kind of two-way mirror, the introduction ceremony begins, and a voice speaks.
マーフェイ様がおいでになります。さあ、心を静めて持てる力を解放するのです。眠っている意識の奥深くから本当の自分が目を覚まします。共振しましょう。 マーフェイ様の力が本当の自分を教えてくれます。
Mafe is a high-ranking member of Snake that we'll soon have the pleasure of meeting. After this cult initiation, we can check the KOWLOON.net terminal again and find a new email from someone named Connie Yang, an important character who will guide us through much of the second half of the story. She asks us to free a bird named Maria from her house, which is just down the street from the Twin Center. Like I said, when someone tells you to do something in this game, you just do it. We're too late though. The bird has already been possessed by Mafe, who reveals that they know we're working with Zeku. They warn us that there's nothing we can do to stop Snake's plan. We can't even save this little bird. Well, that was a bust. Sorry. Snake has canceled their twin seminar and are also messing with the KOWLOON.net terminals, so we aren't able to access anything except for saving our game. After speaking with several characters, we find out that the dead-end alleyway where we first encountered Master Sha may lead to Ryushin Road, where Xiaohei went. There, we meet a mysterious man in a bowler hat.
Excuse me.
Yeah, this guy likes to speak with random English phrases. He's great. Anyway, he throws up a PowerPoint to explain that in the west, around Ryushin Road, the flow of the dragon vein governed by the power of Byakko, the white tiger, has been blocked by sealing stones that now need to be destroyed. Apparently, the corridors and pathways between different parts of the city are warping due to the accumulation of evil energy, so it's dangerous for people to travel through them. The bowler hat man then creates a projection of a doorway that we step through to advance to Ryushin Road. For this next part of the game, we need to find the sealing stones that are blocking the flow of the dragon vein. There are 4 of them, and they're all inside an abandoned theater in this part of town. By speaking to several of the people here, we find out that sawdust is the key to destroying them. One of the first things we do once we arrive is drop off the Bubble Man's eye at the tool shop. Turns out this is the Eye of Enlightenment, which is needed to open some sealed doors inside the theater. However, if it's not cleansed and prepared properly, you'll turn into bubbles if you try to use it. He mentions the previous owner, a man named Hoi. So now we have some context for that earlier scene. Doesn't make it any less insane, but still. It'll take some time before the tool shop guy can clean up the eye for us, so in the meantime, he tells us we should meet someone named Anita Dahl, whose brother also practiced feng shui. Anita is a dancer, referred to as the city's most beautiful woman by many of its denizens. She's actually a cross-dresser, and she is the pronoun the other characters use for her. The only other solid fact we learn about her identity is that her name used to be Suijen, which is also the name of her twin brother. I don't know what parents would give their twin children the same name, but okay. Anita has already heard about us from Xiaohei, and is hoping that we can find her brother. Finding him is in our best interest too, because he's the individual destined to awaken as Byakko. 10 years ago, he went off to search for the dragon's den and never returned. It was around that time that the sealing stones appeared as well. The bromide dealer apparently has some sawdust to help us destroy the stones, but her shop is behind the theater and the direct path is blocked. We'll need to travel through the theater and find the back entrance that leads to the alley where her shop is. The theater is an interesting dungeon. Its main gimmick is the stages that move up and down to different floors. They only stop on specific floors though, so we need to plan our route. There are one-way passages, crumbling floorboards, and ledges that drop us to lower floors to further complicate things. When we finally make our way through, we meet the bromide dealer and get a bag of sawdust from her. She used to have 4 bags, but some guiri have stolen the others, so we'll need to recover them by fighting some bosses on subsequent trips through the theater. While busting up the sealing stones, we're given an advanced lo pan from Anita. A lo pan is a special compass used in feng shui practice. We actually need this to awaken the divine beasts. Why our feng shui master didn't already have one on him is a mystery. Maybe his was taken away when he fell from grace, and the council just didn't give it back to him for this mission. If we return to the tool shop guy, he gives us the Eye of Brightness, a flashlight with the eyeball stuck on the end of it. Give this man the Charles Stark Draper Prize. It's an engineering award. It's funny because he just stuck the eyeball on a flashlight. You know what? Just forget it. On our next trip through the theater, we use the Eye of Brightness to reveal hidden doors. After we make it through and destroy the second sealing stone, we stop by Anita's house again, but this time we meet her brother, Suijen. who just pops out of the ground like that. Even though they refer to each other as younger and older, they're actually twins. I think it's like how one twin will hold it over the other that they were born first. Suijen strikes me as the kind of guy who would do that. Anyway, he explains that when he found the Dragon's Den 10 years ago, he was overwhelmed by a dark energy. Byaku's power and whatever evil force appeared there began fighting inside his body, and he was turned to stone. By destroying the remaining sealing stones, his body will recover and the awakening can take place. Okay, see you later, dude. During our search for the third sealing stone, we learned that Xiaohei has been taken captive by a wanin known as the Symbol Lady, who works for Snake. We find her in a dressing room deep in the backstage area. What a design. The Symbol Lady says we'll never destroy all of the sealing stones, but she just lets Xiaohei go and disappears. Never to be seen again. Seriously, she never shows up again for the rest of the game. Thanks. Xiaohei says she followed us to the theater after meeting with the Onmyoji. As she stood in front of the entrance, she was sucked into this room, captured by whatever the hell the Symbol Lady's power was, probably just annoying people into submission. Xiaohei tells us what she learned from the Onmyoji. It turns out that 2 of the divine beasts cannot be awakened right now. According to the Onmyoji, there are special days throughout history where a specific divine beast is able to be awakened. On these days, a Tendo ceremony takes place. During certain ceremonies in the past, though, the divine beast was not awakened, which has caused a distortion in the flow of the dragon vein. You see, the dragon veins don't just run through space, but through time as well. So a missed Tendo ceremony creates a sort of missed connection. These missed connections are what are known as days of fire. Apparently Genbu, the black tortoise, and Suzaku, the vermilion bird, have days of fire associated with them. So we need to go back in time to make sure the awakenings occur so that we'll then be able to awaken these 2 in the present. As if the story wasn't already complicated enough, we're getting time travel thrown in now. I mean, yeah, why not? After destroying the third sealing stone in this grimy toilet at the end of the alley behind the theater, Suijen shows up to inform us that the last sealing stone is no longer in this part of the city. It's been moved somewhere else by Snake. Our next move is to meet with the Onmyoji back in Kowloon Front. We receive an email from Connie Yang telling us to grab the hand mirror from her house and take it with us to the Onmyoji's lab. Okay, sure thing. Like I said, don't question anything, just do. The Onmyoji kind of reminds me of Doc Brown, if Doc Brown was on even more coke than he already was. He has a mechanical bird instead of a dog named Einstein, and his time machine isn't a DeLorean, it's actually an armillary sphere. You've probably seen them before. They're those old globe-like devices that used to be used to make astronomical predictions. So yeah, the Onmyoji has somehow rigged his to be a time machine, but instead of plutonium and 1.21 gigawatts of electricity, it's powered by Connie Yang's hand mirror. With that, we get sent from May 22nd, 1997 to May 22nd, 1850, during the reign of the Qing dynasty. The Onmyoji tells us not to worry because we can rendezvous with his ancestor in that time when our task is complete to be sent back to the present. I found this part of the game especially bizarre. The music is creepy, and we're out of the narrow confines of Kowloon Walled City and dropped into the more open and spacious Forbidden City of 1850. We've traded our claustrophobia for agoraphobia. And while there are some characters who appear before us directly, several of them stay hidden behind doorways or talk to us through shoji paper windows. It all has an eerie vibe to it. It reminded me a lot of Cosmology of Kyoto. Our mission here is to make sure the Tendo ceremony occurs. The Emperor, Dao Guang, is supposed to awaken as Genbu, but something went wrong at the previous Tendo ceremony that's caused him to lose faith in feng shui. Last time, a monk was supposed to awaken as Seryu, but the feng shui master overseeing the ceremony, whose name was Yaodi, turned out to be possessed by evil. He attempted to take control of the divine beast, so the monk turned himself into a wooden statue, sealing away both himself and Yaodi. The statue of the monk still resides on the palace grounds, kept safe within a shrine. This past event has made the current emperor so paranoid that he's imprisoned anyone who even suggests that a Tendo ceremony should take place. This includes a young doctor named Shantai, who's actually the emperor's nephew, and a lady-in-waiting, Liang Aidane. This whole thing is kind of interesting because in reality, by May 22nd, 1850, Emperor Dao Guang had already died. His death was actually in February of that year. Perhaps because of his defying of fate and postponing of the Tendo ceremony, his life has been prolonged in the world of Kowloon's Gate. Seems like this is a detail the creators wouldn't have just missed, so I feel like there's some significance to it. In any case, the Emperor's defiance has caused evil energy to gather, and it turns out a demon has eaten Liang Aidane while she was in her prison cell. With the help of a Mononoke-tsukai, or spirit user, on the palace grounds, we destroy the demon and free Liang Aidane. Hello, lady. This spirit user also gives us a hermit statue and tells us to try using it to awaken the monk. It doesn't work though, because the hermit statue is apparently a fake. Thanks, bro. Anyway, Liang Aidane asks us to free Shanghai from the dungeon on the palace grounds and gives us a key to his cell. Shanghai knows what's up and also has the royal bloodline running through his veins, so using the advanced Lo Pan on him causes his own power to manifest in a name tag, which reads Shanji. When we show this to Shanghai's wife, she says that this is the name she'll give to her yet-to-be-born child, but she tells us to hold on to the name tag, because we may need it in the future. We head to the palace and use the advanced Lo Pan on the Emperor. Shanghai's spirit appears to guide him, and the Emperor finally accepts his fate to awaken the power of Genbu. Outside the palace, the Onmyoji's mechanical bird leads us to his lab on the imperial grounds. He has the exact same eccentric demeanor as his predecessor. Are we sure this isn't just the same guy? We're sent back to the present and wind up in Kowloon Front. An email from Shanghai points us in the direction of the true hermit statue, which is in the totally reputable establishment, the World of Beautiful Women. Wonder what goes on there. She's also found information about a Wanin named Shanji and is on her way to Shicheng Road to investigate. Of course, Shanji, Shanghai's son, is going to have an important role to play in the plot. We need to get to Shicheng Road, but right now the paths to get to different parts of the city are all fucky. Apparently, Old Man San, the fortune teller, knows the way, but he wants some facial cream first? I swear that's what it says. In the World of Beautiful Women, we find the real hermit statue. Why and how it wound up here is anyone's guess. After all this, we get an email from Wei telling us to meet him in his room at the Kowloon Hotel. Wonder what we'll get up to there. We met Wei during our first trip to Kowloon Front. He owns the Qigong school. In his room at the hotel, we learned that Wei is the leader of Zeku. He informs us that another twin seminar is happening over at the Twin Center, and he wants us to bust it up. One of Snake's high-ranking members, Bardon, will be there too, and we'll most likely have to fight them. One last shocking piece of info he drops is that the leader of Snake is actually an old feng shui master named Yaodi. Even though Yaodi was imprisoned inside the wooden statue with the monk during one of the Tendo ceremonies, Yaodi's vengeful spirit escaped and now controls Snake. We hurry over to the Twin Center, but before leaving the hotel, we can visit the Snake saleswoman down the hall and get some facial cream for Old Man San. Shit's going down, but we gotta get that old man his beauty products. On the way to the Twin Center, we run into Changling, twin brother of Chanlu, the guy who's working as a spy in Snake's ranks. Changling ain't doing so hot. The twins, who took us to see Mr. Chen earlier, confront us at the Twin Center, and Bardon makes their appearance. Just as things look dire, Changlu enters the scene. He attacks Bardon, but during the fight, Old Snake appear. These are 4 of the highest-ranking members of the organization, also known as the Twin Master 4 Heavenly Kings. That's not really the greatest translation, but it's a literal one, so that's what I'm going with. They all have names, too. Wuxi, Shanxi, Linxi, and Laoxi. They possess Chanling and merge him with Changlu. What's actually happening here is Old Snake are sending Changlu and Chanling to the Wanin world, also known as the Path of Delusions, which has been mentioned in passing in a few emails and conversations, but I haven't talked about it yet because it hasn't had any significance on the plot until now. After this, Old Snake used their power to create an even stronger version of Bardon and leave. The exorcism talisman that we got from the spirit user in the past makes quick work of them. We head back to Wei to report, but meet one of the Honto who tells us that Wei decided to go after Shanghai. We need to get to Xicheng Road, but Old Man's son wants his stupid facial cream first. So we hand it over, but now he says facial cream just won't cut it anymore to retain his youthful glow. You wrinkly old A younger voice then starts speaking, telling us to check the biocommunication option on a Kowloon Net terminal. I honestly don't know what's happening here. I've watched this scene over and over, but it just doesn't make any sense. We see Old Man Son speaking in his little boy voice, crying out in pain and begging for forgiveness. Some text pops up on screen that says the boy and his older brother did something bad. They let the young girl pass through to the other part of the city. Then we see Ai Pin, who we haven't seen since the beginning of the game. She says to hurry to the promised place. After this, Shanghai appears and turns old before our eyes. Finally, Old Man's son transforms into Kakuna, and with his little boy voice asks us to bring a seaweed pack to his older brother, which is his actual body. This is me right now. I'm making the same face as this dude. Alright, let's take a time out here before we go get a seaweed pack for this old fortune teller in an alleyway who apparently has the soul of his younger brother inside of him. Or the soul of a Kakuna, I don't really know which. I mean, like, you know, what am I doing with my life? The last thing I made on this channel was a nearly 3-hour video about Serial Experiments Lane that took 2 months to make and nearly drove me insane. So what do I do to follow it up? I decide to cover a game with a story that's even more convoluted and difficult to make sense of. Seriously, Kowloon's Gate makes Serial Experiments Lane look like a bedtime story. Originally, after I finished the Lane video, I told myself I needed to do something simple, something chill. I mean, it's in the name of the channel, it's dungeon chill, it's not dungeon stroking out. But no, I had to do Kowloon's Gate, I just couldn't help myself. I knew it was gonna end up like this, but I just had to do it. And I know what some people are thinking. Why do you need to cover the story in so much detail? You could just do a quick summary. You don't need to go through everything. First of all, I'm not going through everything. I'm actually streamlining a bunch of these events. I didn't even talk about Master Sha getting possessed and creating an illusion of Shanghai that sets on fire. Or the part where the random hacker's face melts, Raiders of the Lost Ark style, when attempting to use a Kowloon Net terminal. And second of all, there's no point in even talking about this game without talking about its story. And I need to demonstrate to all of you who can't or won't or don't want to play Kowloon's Gate just how insane it is. That's my mission. That's the reason I make these videos. So I just gotta keep telling myself that it's okay. We'll get through this together. Okay, existential crisis over. So we go to the seafood market and grab a seaweed pack to bring back to Old Man's son in the alleyway. Then he just thanks us and lets us through the gate behind him. No mention of any of that stuff that just happened on the Kowloon Net terminal. Okay, through the gate though, we find Wei. Doesn't look like trying to travel to Xicheng Road worked out for him. He's also acting crazy. So before we go rushing in and end up that way ourselves, we head back to the hotel for more info. The Honto have managed to rescue Wei and put him back together. They inform us that a cursed doll called Little Tanky is the reason why Wei ended up like this. We need to destroy it, but it's hidden behind some Wanin guardians who are invisible. So first, we have to go to the Path of Delusions and retrieve a pair of delusional glasses so that we can see them and speak with them. There's actually a doorway that leads directly to the Path of Delusions in Kowloon Front, but you can't get in without an offering. And the offering isn't just any old item. It needs to be someone's memories. The Wanin on the Path of Delusions feed on people's minds. So if we don't have something for them to attach themselves to, they'll feed on our own memories and drive us insane. So we head to the Navigator shop, where the navigators apparently just hang out inside of television sets. We need to choose one of them and record their memories onto our access card to use as bait. We're free to choose either Little Fly or Honey Lady, and I don't think it makes a difference, but Little Fly sucked at giving directions, so I'm going with Honey Lady for this. After showing the access card with the navigator's memories to the person guarding the door, we enter a grimy hallway that ends with a painted scroll of an old man. This is the entrance to the Path of Delusions. The Path of Delusions itself ends up being rather mundane. It's an old
style wooden house that for sure has an interesting layout, but other than that, there's nothing too out of the ordinary about it. That is until the Wanins show up. The access card with Honey Lady's memories seems to satisfy them, so they give us the delusional glasses. After that, they speak in riddles for a bit, then tell us to leave. So that's it for this place. For now. After we return to the city, we can speak with Little Fly and Honey Lady again. They inform us that the old man in the painting that acts as the entrance to the Path of Delusions is Ma Shantong, and the Path of Delusions is actually inside his head. We'll learn more about this later, so stick a pin in that for now. With the delusional glasses, we can speak to the Window Man, one of the invisible Wanin who are hanging out in the city. He tells us that Little Tanky is underneath the Twin Center, which is also the place where Snake is manufacturing Blue Claw, the drug they use to control twins. We head there and use the glasses again to speak to the Door Wanin, who's been ordered by Snake to not let anyone enter. It's clear this Wanin has been forced into his position as a guard, so he asks us to get some firecrackers for him because he's sick of Snake's plans. Hey man, you want some firecrackers? I'll get you some firecrackers. In fact, I'll get you some super firecrackers. With the super firecrackers, the doorman lets us through and we find the little Tanky doll. Mr. Chen shows up and explains that with just one strand of a person's hair, he can feed it to the doll and that person will be incapacitated. That's actually what happened to Wei earlier. Right now, Mafei is on their way to capture Xiaohei so they can get a strand of her hair to put into the doll. Oh, and the doll also has a mirror that can consume anyone who gets caught in the reflection. Because why not? Using our own mirror, we reflect the doll's mirror back at Mr. Chen, and he explodes. They really like blowing people up in this game. With Mr. Chen dead, the doorman has nothing to fear anymore, so he uses the super firecrackers to destroy the little Tanky doll. Supposedly, this destroys Snake's Blue Claw production as well. Back at the turtle shop, we're given an ampoule of Blue Claw that we can then give to Old Man Sun. Why? I have no idea. This part isn't explained at all. But now, we can pass through the gate behind him and enter Xicheng Road. This third section of the game has us exploring the waterways beneath the city to retrieve a birthstone for a Vietnamese photographer named Nguyen. He made a wish on it to find subjects for a photography book he wants to publish, but he dropped it in the waterways and it's now attracting Guiri. Things that have been wished on hold great spiritual energy that Guiri crave. The power of the wish is also bolstering their strength as they feed on it. We find out that Xiaohei also met with Nguyen and now she's on her way to Oyi Road to track down Shan. The only way to get there is through the waterways, so we'll retrieve Nguyen's birthstone to weaken the Guiri down there, and we'll clear them out to restore feng shui balance while we're at it. Our first order of business is getting the water gates open so that we can access the deeper levels of this area. There's also an old ship dry dock down here called the HMS Champion. Apparently, it was a ship that Old Man Sans sailed on during his youth. So I guess he was a sailor before he became a fortune teller obsessed with beauty products. Eventually, we'll reach a locked door with drawings of a tiger and dragon on them respectively. With no way forward, we briefly return to the surface, but it turns out that the owner of the snake shop, which is right near the entrance to the waterways, has the key. According to him, it just suddenly appeared in his shop after he felt some kind of earthquake. Convenient. Past the previously locked doors, we find an old corpse. He identifies himself as a Mononoke user. The same Mononoke user from the Qing Dynasty era? I don't know actually, this is never made clear, but maybe. In any case, he just hands over Nguyen's birthstone, and we return to the surface with it. Before heading back to Nguyen, we check our email and find a message from Wei. According to the Honto quadruplets, evil energy has been accumulating in the Path of Delusions, and Ma Shantong, the old dude who has the path in his head, is at the risk of being swallowed by his own mind. If that happens, the Path of Delusions will disappear. This is bad because Xiaohei may have already found her way there, so if it disappears, no more Xiaohei. Can somebody please just tell this girl to stay put for a minute so I can catch up with her? When we return to Nguyen to give him his birthstone back, we find out that he's been captured by Laoshi, one of the 4 heavenly kings. He says he'll make a deal with us. Hand over the name tag we got from Shanghai and he'll release Nguyen. So we go into the waterways again to make the exchange. We meet at the designated spot and hand over the name tag. Laoshi even keeps his word and frees Nguyen. I'm kind of in shock.
That's the most honest villain I think I've ever seen in anything. We return the birthstone, and Guyen gives us a photo he took of Xiaohe. Oh, so she had time to stop for a photo shoot, but she won't wait up for us? We exit the Waterways and find ourselves in front of a morgue. An elevator inside takes us down to a small shrine with the same painting of Ma Shantung that we saw behind the door in Kowloon Front. Using the delusional glasses lets us speak with Ma Shantung. He just reiterates what we already know about Yao Di's spirit controlling Snake, his desire to regain his body, and Snake's desire for immortality. He says we need to hurry it up and awaken the divine beasts. Yeah, well, if we weren't sitting here listening to some crazy old dude in a painting tell us stuff we already know, then we'd be closer to doing that now, wouldn't we? When we take the lift back up and exit the morgue, instead of being at the Waterway, we find ourselves in Oyi Road. This part of the city is made up of many doctors, dentists, plastic surgeons, and other specialist offices. Again, drawing on real-life stories of the unlicensed doctors who practice in Kowloon Walled City. We need to make use of the teleportation device that these fairy twins operate to travel to different parts of the road due to the fact that evil energy has swallowed up some of the pathways. This is actually happening all over the city. In an email from the screw shop owner at one point, we find out that half of Longcheng Road has just disappeared. Here on Oyi Road, there are a series of apartment buildings that act as the last major real-time dungeons of the game. While exploring the apartments, we enter an area that isn't on the map and meet a puppet user boy, Ningyo Tsukai no Shonen. That's what it says. He tells us that he and other monster users like the Mononoke Tsukai have been around for a long time, practicing their art, but they don't have the power to stand up to Snake. He also says that they don't really care to either. Then he just walks off into the darkness. And that's it. That's the first time we ever see this kid and the last. No, but I actually love this scene. It hints at an even larger world than what's already on display in Kowloon's Gate. Just the possibility that there are darker, more mysterious, spiritual levels that we aren't aware of. These are the moments in fiction, whether it's a book, movie, or game, where my mind reels. Where did that boy come from? Where did he go? What's at the end of this blackness? This hallway that doesn't even exist on our map? I'm asking these questions because I love questions. Fuck the answers, give me the mystery. Our navigator in this section, Bamboo Z, says the boy had something to do with gathering the Guiri in this location, but honestly, I have no clue. After returning to the city, we run into a Wanin called Monitor Man, who has an image of Xiaohe on his screen. Xiaohe has been on the trail of the Wanin Shanji and followed him to the path of delusions. Because the path is in Ma Shantong's head and he's being affected by the malicious energy building in the city, things on the path are very unstable. Monitor Man found Xiaohe there and placed her inside of himself for protection. Yes, I accept this. After a trip through another apartment building, we stop by a dental office, and a liquid Wanin bursts through the window and introduces himself as Shanji. This is Shantai's son. At some point, he became a Wanin, and this is a problem, because he's the one who's supposed to awaken as Genbu in the present, but he can't if he's a Wanin. He's also a little bit unhinged. He recognizes that we have the delusional glasses and tells us that there's a storm happening on the path of delusions right now, and it's impossible to enter. After that, he just sinks into the floor. Don't worry, he'll be back. At the end of one of our apartment explorations, we come face to face with Connie Yang, our online guide throughout the game. Turns out, she's a purse, nailed to the wall, in the basement of this apartment building. She tells us that Mafei is here too, but we can't get to where they are from this spot, so we need to head back to the city and find a different point of entrance. We get an email from the Onmyoji saying he's found the other day of fire that we need to travel to in the past and to meet with him as soon as we can. We also find out that the soup shop owner in the city isn't on our side and has informed Snake that we're here. Shanxi, one of the 4 heavenly kings, has arrived to capture us. So the fairy twins, who have been teleporting us around, try to distract him with a dance.
Ladies and gentlemen, Asia #1 妖精さんの素敵なダンスショー。
I'm out of comments for this stuff. It doesn't work. Shanxi demands that we hand over Shanji. I know, these names are getting confusing. Shanxi believes we have Shanji in a special bottle that we got from the bottle shop owner earlier. We don't. Then the monitor man appears and Xiaohei begs us not to give Shanji over to Shanxi. Then Shanxi again demands that I hand Shanji over to him. For fuck's sake, I don't have him. So then we have to fight an item battle against Shanxi, and that's it. One of the 4 Heavenly Kings is dead. Easy. Xiaohei tells us we need to hurry and rescue Connie, because Ma Fei is heading to her location. When we get down to her room again, she's being overwhelmed by Ma Fei's power. Connie doesn't want Xiaohei to see her in her current state, but Xiaohei shows up anyway just before Connie is devoured by her own delusions. Bamboo Z takes Xiaohei back to Oyi Road, and we're left to deal with Ma Fei. As you can probably guess by now, an item battle takes care of her. After leaving the apartments, Oyi Road begins to collapse. Bamboo Z explains that we're having an effect on the city. It's being restored to its original state, which is that of non-existence. So it's not actually evil energy that's been swallowing up the city. We're balancing it out and making parts of it disappear. We wind up back at the bar in Kowloon Front. We need to find Shanji, but before we get a chance to do anything, an explosion rocks the city. 2 of the Honto show up and tell us that a dragon's den has opened up on the path of delusions, and we need to go meet up with Wei. The path to the hotel is gone, so the twins tell us to go to the Qigong school building nearby and meet up with Charlie. When we get there, he informs us the taxidermist has made a pact with a powerful Guiri, and he's also hiding the final sealing stone in his shop. Yeah, you remember that? We were supposed to also be looking for that final sealing stone. So Charlie leads us through the corridors to the taxidermy shop, and we have to fight a powered-up version of the taxidermist. First, we exorcise the Guiri that he made the pact with, then we fight the taxidermist on his own. He drops a life ball, a very important item for the end of the game, which we are actually pretty close to, if you can believe it. With that out of the way, we destroy the final sealing stone. Suijen shows up, and we use the Luopan on him to awaken Byakko.
白虎の力というものか。なんという力だ。Suijen、私はようやく。
The world is literally falling apart around us at this point, but we still need to stop and check our email. We cannot fall behind in our communications. Papillon, one of the users from the Rhizome chat room, has sent us a message about 1,000 horses that are racing across the land. He implores us to somehow harness the power of these war horses to defeat Snake. Yeah, sure thing, dude. I'll get right on that. The streets between places in Kowloon Front are almost totally gone now, so we have to make use of biocommunication on the Kowloon Net terminals, which now acts as a teleportation service, whisking us around to different parts of the city. We arrive at the hotel on our way to meet with Wei, which is what the Honto twins wanted us to do. The desk clerk at the hotel tells us that Charlie found some ice that he wanted to give us, so we use the bottle that we've been carrying around and receive a bottle with something inside in return. Upstairs, we meet with Wei and Game Kids. They've determined that the dragon's den that opened up in the Path of Delusions is associated with Genbu. But they're worried that if we can't make it there in time, Yaodi will steal Genbu's power. The bowler hat man appears in the hallway outside of Wei's room to tell us pretty much the same thing Wei and Kids just told us. His advice?
No idea なのです。
What? Seriously? We warp back to the bar, but there's no sign of Rich anywhere. But we do hear a familiar voice coming from somewhere. Turns out it's coming from the bottle with something inside it. That ice Charlie found was a frozen Shanji. How did he become frozen? I don't know. But he's melted now, and he's decided to come along with us to see things through. If you remember, the Omyoji had emailed us earlier to tell us that he figured out the date for another Day of Fire, so we head over to his lab. The other Day of Fire is May 22nd, 1920 in Shanghai. the same date as today again, but for some reason the Onmyoji is having trouble calibrating his time machine. This is where Shanji pipes up to let us know that it's actually the 23rd now. Apparently we can only be sent back to the exact day in the past, so if we wanted to be in 1920 on May 22nd, we'd have to wait a whole year. That seems like a huge design oversight there, Doc.
Marty!
Shanji suggests that we use the power of the Dragon's Den that's opened up in the Path of Delusions as a bypass for this little flaw in the time machine's design. How? I don't know, but the Onmyoji says he'll tinker with it and see what happens. After leaving the Onmyoji's lab, another explosion rips through the city. It's from the bar, so we head back there and up to Xiaohei's room. A dragon's den has opened here as well. Shanji feels as if he's being sucked in, so we need to get away from this place. On our way out, we find the window man, who's also been drawn here, and Game Kids is inside the reflection. He's worried that if the dragon's den here and the one in the Path of Delusions remain open, Yaodi will definitely make use of them. So we gotta head back to the Onmyoji and try our luck with the time machine. He says he's done his best to calibrate it to the correct date of May 22nd, but it's quite unstable. Shanji pops up and says that Xiaohei was sucked into the dragon's den that appeared in her room. This is totally new information. I don't know how he got it because he's been with us the whole time, but I guess because he's supposed to also awaken as a divine beast, maybe he has some connection to the dragon veins and can tell what's going on. I don't know. Xiaohei's twin sister is calling to her from the Day of Fire in the past, but if the two meet directly, they'll turn into Wanin. We saw that happen to Chanlu and Chanling earlier. It's like not letting the streams cross. So what do we need to do? Are you ready for this? We need to send the photo of Xiaohei that we got from Guyan earlier to the past and make sure it arrives there before the real Xiaohei, who's traveling through the Dragon Vein right now. Kind of like cruising through the life stream in FF7, I guess. If the photo arrives before her, it will capture her spirit when she arrives, saving her from meeting her twin sister directly. Then we'll go into the past to connect the Dragon Vein and retrieve the photo. Once again, we'll meet with one of the Onmyoji's ancestors to return to the present once we've accomplished our task. You got that? So simple. So away goes the photo, and then away we go. We arrive in Shanghai, or rather a floating illusory island in the Bay of Shanghai. We're no longer bound by the laws of physics in this place either, as taking the wrong course of actions results in us getting stuck in a loop. Here we meet the Onmyoji, who is once again basically the same person as the one in the present and the one in 1850. He still has his mechanical bird too. This one is steam-powered. The Onmyoji intercepted Xiaohei's photo. With the photo in hand, we then meet Nan Xiaomei, a girl who looks and sounds an awful lot like Xiaohei. She tells us about a painting that fell from the sky and says that she's been ordered by Madame Fei to carry it to the feng shui tower, so we agree to help her. Returning through a door we've already passed through now takes us to a new area, where we find a person strapped to a strange device that we'll find out later is called the delusion machine. There's also a painting of two children propped up against the wall. One of the children in the painting comes to life, and it turns out to be Shanji. He's no longer just a liquid. He also says he feels like there are two people inside his head. Just then, the person strapped to the machine starts to convulse, and another Shanji appears in the painting. The two Shanjis are extremely confused by this, and that makes three of us. Then they disappear. Madame Fei then appears before us and says that once the Tendo ceremony is complete, the dragon veins will be reconnected and Xiaohei can reappear. She says that the painting that fell from the sky is not the one we saw in the other room with the two Shanjis, but the photo of Xiaohei that we have with us. She orders us to take the photo to another room where Xiaohei's sister is waiting. So we head through the door and find ourselves in a large MC Escher-style rotating room. Following the stairs in here leads to several other rooms. Inside one of them is Xiaohei's sister, who turns out to be just a shelf of objects. When we place Xiaohei's photo in the frame on one of the shelves, Xiaohei's sister explains that Xiaohei is from this time, 1920. Xiaohei and her sister are actually manifestations of the power that was originally inside of Lan Xiaomei. She is the one meant to be awakened as Suzaku. But 3 years ago, in 1917, Madame Fei sensed Yaodi's presence attempting to corrupt the divine beast. So she extracted Xiaomei's power and split it in two. One half of that power stayed in 1920 as a curio cabinet, marked down from $5.99 to $449 on IKEA while supplies last. The other half, Xiaohei, was sent 80 years into the future, to 1997. That way, Suzaku's power would be safely separated. As we continue exploring this place, we run into other Wanin who say many cryptic things. Some of it may have some vague symbolic reference to the actual story, but most of it seems like nonsense. Xiaohei's sister shows up again and says she's met with Shanji somehow. As we already know, like his ancestors before him, he is destined to awaken as Genbu, but he can't as a Wanin. However, in this time of 1920, he's yet to turn into a Wanin. Guess being inside of a painting doesn't count. He also doesn't know anything about his heritage and his destiny to awaken as a divine beast. Xiaohei's sister has told him everything, so she tells us to find him and take him back to the present so he can awaken as Genbu. At one point, Wuxi shows up and steals Xiaohei's photo, so we have to fight him. It's an item battle, so you know the drill by now. We beat him and reclaim Xiaohei's photo. The path becomes more twisted and we enter a room with an unconscious Lan Xiaomei. There, a Wanin named Wan Chaoming tells us to hurry up and perform our divination before anyone else can interfere. He made a pact with Xiaomei's mother to keep her fate from her until the time was right, and now that day has come. We use the Luo Pan on her, but she doesn't awaken. Wang Chaomin starts freaking out. Madame Fei appears and tells us that of course she won't awaken, her power has already been split. She says we're running out of time because Wuxi's earlier arrival means that Yaodi has already figured out what we're up to. The only way to fight Yaodi is to use the painting of the 5 mountains, which contains the power of the 8 immortals. This refers to a sacred chain of mountains in China and the 8 immortals of ancient Chinese legend. Using the painting and the exorcism talisman we have should be enough to destroy Yaodi. Back in the room with Xiaohei's sister, we place the photo again, but Xiaohei and her sister's voice then tell us to go back to our time and awaken Suzaku. When we go back to the Onmyoji though, he says the armillary sphere has lost calibration and we can't go back. However, that Wanin from earlier, Wan Chaoming, mentioned Li Hon is here in the past. Li Hon is the pawn shop owner from Longcheng Road. He makes brief appearances throughout the early game and then we don't have anything to do with him until right now. Turns out he's one of the most important characters in the game. He's been using the Suzaku mirror to travel through time just for the hell of it. So the Onmyoji tells us to go get the Suzaku mirror from him. Li Hon is hanging out at the end of the pier. He says he knew that Xiaohei was from a different time the moment she showed up at his store 3 years ago, holding on to the Suzaku mirror. He gives up the mirror so we can go back and finish our mission. Li Hon says he's staying here because it feels like the only safe place to be if we wind up failing. Thanks for the vote of confidence, buddy. We use the mirror in front of the person strapped to the delusion machine. It opens up and we return to 1997. And no, I don't know who this person inside this machine is. Now, I don't know if I missed something here, but I don't think we awakened a divine beast in 1920. We attempted to with Lan Xiaomei, but it didn't work. So the only thing we did was rescue Xiaohei. I went over this section a few times and I really can't figure it out. Unless just the attempt counted for the divine beast connection. But anyway, I guess we did something because when we return, we enter Xiaohei's room and find the photo on the desk. She then appears and asks us to use the Luo Pan on her, which allows her to awaken as Suzaku. Next, we need to go to the Path of Delusions to awaken Shanji as Genbu. This time, however, the Path of Delusions is full of several strong Guiri. After restoring balance to them, we arrive on the other side. the Tower of Feng Shui. Dinshi is waiting for us in an item battle. For some reason, after he's gone, we receive the name tag back that we gave to Laoshi earlier. In fact, we never actually fight Laoshi one-on-one, which is weird. Maybe he's not as bad as the others. A misunderstood Twin Master Heavenly King. Inside the tower, we find the painting of Ma Shantong. From the painting, a manifestation of his delusions appears as a two-headed doll that transforms into a monster. Item battle time. No biggie, although the game doesn't regenerate our health in between the Linshi fight and this one, so it was dicey for a moment. Next, a passage opens up and we find Shanji's painting covered in dust. Shanji has almost forgotten who he is, so we use the name tag to remind him, and then the Luopan to awaken Genbu. We reappear in the bar. When we step outside, the city transforms into a giant living shrine of evil. Inside, the four heavenly kings appear, so we actually didn't defeat them before. They have the wooden monk who will awaken as Seiryu and are attempting to extract his power. So we need to face all four heavenly kings at once now. All we need to do is use the ball of life that the taxidermist dropped to defeat them. Afterwards, the war horses that were prophesized by Papillon in his email earlier show up and trample the four heavenly kings, which is a crazy scene. In that moment, Yaodi appears, having been freed from the confines of the wooden monk statue. We use the exorcism talisman and the painting of the five mountains to weaken Yaodi. Then we use the real hermit statue. This destroys Yaodi's hold on the monk. The last thing to do is use the Luopan so that the monk can awaken as Seiryu. With the four divine beasts finally awakened and all the dragon veins connected, the yin version of Kowloon Walled City is destroyed. It's kind of funny that all this time we were trying to destroy the city, not save it. I know technically it wasn't supposed to exist, and we're restoring balance to the world, but still. Afterwards, the feng shui master stands among the ruins of the city. The bowler hat man appears and tells us that the world of yin and yang have been separated, as is the natural order of things. He then reveals himself to be Ai Pin, who was guiding us all along. So that's why her voice changed when we listened to her speaking with the other feng shui council members in the beginning of the game. After the credits roll, we can walk around the ruined city and eventually find Lan Xiaomei. However, a monstrous being appears from the darkness and grabs her. It looks like the four heavenly kings merged into one. In a flash of light, they disappear, but one of the arms is left behind. And that's the end. Sequel bait? Probably. In some of the interviews with the developers in Complete KOWLOON'S Gate, there are hints of a sequel, but we never ended up getting a true KOWLOON'S Gate 2. Though there were a few related projects that came about that I'll get to in the conclusion of this video. As far as the story of Kowloon's Gate goes, it's a lot. They definitely took a maximalist approach. Kowloon's Gate is full of philosophical themes, historical fabrications, cultural concepts, examinations of technology and communication, and a preoccupation with myths and legends. It reminded me a lot of postmodern novels like Thomas Pynchon's Gravity's Rainbow, Don DeLillo's Underworld, or Zadie Smith's White Teeth. These dense, complex tomes filled with a hyperfixation on information that almost drowns out their characters and plots. Kowloon's Gate tends to stay more focused on its characters, and I think some of the contrivances in its narrative come from needing to give the player something to do, some task to complete or item to find. If you want to get metaphorical with it, the labyrinthine nature of Kowloon Gate's story is in line with the erratic physical layout and structure of Kowloon Walled City, a maze of passageways and back alleys, stairwells and corridors that only someone from that place could ever make sense of. As the main protagonist and as the player, we are not from this world. We are outsiders who can only bumble around, rely on the guidance of those inside, and hope that we're not being led astray. But do you really need to think about it in such an abstract way to actually enjoy Kowloon's Gate? No, not at all. The eerie atmosphere and presentation is what draws you in near the beginning, and just when that starts to feel like it's wearing thin, the story itself picks up pace in the second half. It can be overwhelming and difficult to follow, and if you get too caught up in the details, you probably won't have a good time. But if you let yourself be swept up by the momentum, it leaves you with a sense of urgency and excitement, even if it's hard to know the exact whys and whats of everything that's happening. This sense of pacing extends to the gameplay too. There's mystery here that pulls you along, and there are several moments where you feel like a detective, getting information from people, running down leads, and piecing together clues. If you're a fan of adventure games, there's a lot to love, and even some quality of life elements, like characters telling you what items you need to find or what you need to do with them. This helps Kowloon's Gate sidestep the trap of many adventure games, where you're left helplessly using every item in your inventory trying to figure out a puzzle. And again, it keeps the gameplay from grinding to a halt. And then there's the other side to the game, the dungeon crawling. Exploration is fun and relatively painless thanks to the designated map button and the inclusion of navigators to guide you through the mazes. The lack of random encounters alleviates frustration, but tying the combat to exploration by having certain enemies unlock doorways and other paths forward makes combat still feel essential. The actual mechanics of using feng shui principles combined with a tried and true elemental affinity system takes a familiar RPG concept and turns it on its head. And again, going back to quality of life, being able to heal from battle while exploring is a nice touch. Everything about dungeon crawling is so well balanced, and moving back and forth between adventure game sections and dungeon crawling sections keeps things fresh. You never spend too long in either gameplay phase, so they never wear out their welcome. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a huge fan of adventure games and dungeon crawlers. They're two of my favorite genres, so Kowloon's Gate felt like it was made for me. There's only that pesky problem of a language barrier. You really need to listen to conversations and instructions to make any progress. As for the legacy of Kowloon's Gate, some people built a recreation of Kowloon Walled City in Second Life. It seems to be a combination of an attempt to recreate the real-life city and elements from the game. I've never tried Second Life, so this footage is from Japanese user Rurun on YouTube. As far as official follow-ups, there was a prequel of sorts released for PlayStation VR in 2017 called Kowloon's Gate VR. Suzaku. A non-VR update was released a few months later, and it features Japanese, Chinese, and English subtitles. Unfortunately, purchase is region-locked, and it's not available on most Western PlayStation Network services. If you're expecting something similar to the PS1 game, though, you're gonna be let down. All you do is walk around recreations of the opening areas and take photos of different people and objects. You can't even speak to or interact with most of the NPCs you encounter. It's neat to see some parts of the original game recreated, but ultimately Kowloon's Gate VR Suzaku is a disappointment. A full sequel titled KOWLOON'S Rhizome, A Day of Fire was announced in 2019 with a scheduled release for PS4, PC, and Nintendo Switch in Japan in 2021 planned. However, this was quietly cancelled. It was then announced that the game would change from a 3D exploration game to a visual novel that would be released in chapters through Japanese site Booth. Checking the page, there was a scheduled release date for March 31st, 2025. But then that was bumped back to May 31st, so who knows if it's ever actually coming out. Maybe I'll check it out at some point if it ever releases. Even almost 30 years after its initial release, KOWLOON'S Gate still draws fascination from an audience that can't fully explore its mysteries because of the language barrier. For those who can dive into those mysteries, it's still an enigmatic piece of software, a product of a time in game development when big artistic risks were still encouraged, even if they didn't always reap the greatest return on investment. It's a dark, weird, perplexing PS1 game, but unlike a lot of other games that carry strangeness as their defining characteristic, KOWLOON'S Gate actually has some solid gameplay to back it up. Hopefully, a fan translation is completed someday so more people can experience it. I feel confident that I got most of the plot details correct, but there may be some elements that I missed or didn't interpret correctly. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I'm not a translator, and KOWLOON'S Gate is packed with a ton of detail and nuance, so it would be nice to see a solid translation of it. I'd definitely delve into its depths again if and when that happens. And that's it for KOWLOON'S Gate. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I only ask that you like it, leave a comment, share it with a friend or a stranger, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. More videos to come. This one took a very long time to make and drove me a little bit nuts, especially while writing the script, but it was worth it. And yeah, KOWLOON'S Gate is a worthwhile experience for adventure game and dungeon crawler fans. If you enjoy what I do and would like to help fund future endeavors, I have a Patreon and YouTube memberships are available, so you can join the Dungeon Dwellers, all these fine folks scrolling on screen who allow me to do this full time. YouTube's ad revenue is always fickle and they're constantly changing the rules, so I feel better relying on people who want to see more videos from me rather than some corporate platform that thinks it's a brand. There's a Patreon link in the description and a join button on the video page. All paid members get their names in the videos, and they get to watch them a few days before I set them live on YouTube. In that time period, they also get them ad-free. They get exclusive updates, occasional polls on what games I cover next, as well as a super secret playlist of Dungeon Dweller-only videos. Right now, there are 2 short reviews and a Q&A video that I did at the end of the year last year. Now that I finished these last 2 huge videos, I'm going to get back to a normal upload schedule. I want to do another bonus video soon, and yeah, just get back to looking at weird stuff that doesn't take 2 months to research and put together. I don't mind doing these long, hyper in-depth ones, but I'd rather not do them back to back like this again. But anyway, that's that. I have to give a shout out to more Dungeon Dwellers. If you support with $5 or more each month, you get your name read out loud at the end of videos like these Dungeon Architects. 2Password for Kids, An Owl, Antichrist Alex, Benifer94, Blake Golan, Bliblio Jones, Chaos Arcanum, Dan, Dan Persona, Darkest Abyss, David Carr, David Host, Dilatar Tepes, Desiree Corruption, Dirt Possum, Dollar Store DJ, El Jaguar, Emmeline Payne, FM Kalash, Eugene, Fuzzmosis, Garbage Person, Glen Haven, Goats and Goblins, Half HP, Hibernia Scholar, High Food Court, Industrial Illusion, Izzy Lexus, Jack the Nipper, Jared Bynum, J-Bud Airline, Jehuti, John B, Joshua Ayers, Justin Darnell, Kale, Captain Ketchup, Kenny Mitchell, Kevin Hanley, Krizik, Crunk Wizard, Kyowa, Mira, Magic Circuit, Max Grosshandler, Meownarchy, Micah Powers, Mortags Gaming, Mr. Loser, Mr. Eater, Neckout the Brave, Nick Wolf, Noise, Paul Fierce, Pazuzu, Prinny Dude, Rez, Richard Cutting, Richard Sanchez, Rog U, Saint Murray, SC Fade, Shannon Gates, Shivering Dova, Sigma Simp 69, Silatixo, Superior Posterior, Sway Evenly, The Stoic One, Toffee, SMT, Tucky Ducky, Vinci, Wolfram C, Zach Diedrich, and Zethrin, as well as these dungeon connoisseurs. 8-Bit Unicorn, Akai Kiki, Alberto Amatucci, Alex M, Alex Nadeau, Alfred Correa, Ambrowski, Andrew Tovaniti, Anjan01, Anthony Labella, Aranai Saez, Arrested Rabbit, A Sentient Toaster, Ashley Black, Ataraxian, Ava M. Dumas, Burger Von Burger, Bewildering Avocado, Blue Mantis, Bunzo, Butt Salad, Keiichi, Captain Swing, Cat Cathedral, Catherine Gordon, Churm Slurm, Chumpkins, Claim, Claire Myers, Cloudy Wizard, Concrete Mascara, Cormac, Crassus Zero, Crippler Jones, Chris LaFord L, Crooked Rook, Dale Walden, Daniel Tallow, Dapney, Days Clockwork, Dikadiko, Deroko, Devil's Honey, Dr. Jellybean, Dragon Ace SG7, Drebo Bebop, Dungeon Chili, Eric Clapton, Fangro, Francine Bridge, Fremder, Gandalf the Gay, Glitterthroat, Hakon Boyum, Harvey Bodega, Heartman, Icehammer 82, Indigo Happy, Regular Rob, It's a Mia Mia, Nekokami, Jack and the Candle, James Chambers, Jason Cook, J-Rob, Jeffrey Koenig, Gemma, Jen, Joan Valise, Joe Gother, Jollybean, Joshua Weber, King Bonkers Error 1884, Karen Rosenow, Critter, Lady Nagrum, Lamont AR, Lampshader, Lemidgeton, Leonardo Schwarz de Souza, Liana, Lux Custodes, Macrophage, Man with Confetti, Masakishi, Matt Norad, Max Cohen, McEldritch, Meatman, Michael Prey, Michael Oliver, Minced Meat, Miss Duragonu, Miss M, Mr. Independent, Monkey Kid 61, Mr. Al Packleton, Mumbles, Nick, Old Dead Lemons, Olof Albine, Please Keep Making Videos, Rezo 55555, Roland, Sable, Scorpix22, Sensei Wolfman, Shard King, Sean, Silius Soda, Cicerin, Skyclad Weeb, Slycat, Solar, Sorbet, Spencer Newton, T, Talony Dew, Taylor Martin, TCB, The Mangled Pancreas, Thief of 16-Bit Technology, Tor Dragon, True Axiom, Tuesday Twin, TV's Brent, Vexen Dagran, Violet the Insatiable, Volkendo, Warrior Song, Wild and Horned Hermit, Zucker, Zills, Your Man in Japan, and Zorik. Thanks for all of your support, and thank you for watching. I know I said this last time, but the next video won't be as long of a wait, I promise. Until then, KOWLOON'S Gate, check it out. Dungeon Chill, out.
こんにちは。私は本物の日本人なんですけれども、今日は去る日本の大企業から参りました。そしてこれがプレイステーションです。ところでソニーほどの会社がプレイステーションの発売にあたって本当に何百万ドルものお金を使うとお思いになりますか？しかもこんなサックなゲームにサクビクタイム。嫌です。ホーミー。母親は悪い子は決して褒めません。ソニーはナムコを選びました。ナムコの新しいゲームは決してサックなんかじゃありません。サッキングなんてことはもってのほかです。